In a stunning development that has sent shockwaves through Israel's political landscape, several of Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's closest advisors have been arrested in what Israeli media is now dubbing Qatar Gate. This explosive scandal erupted when investigators revealed evidence suggesting these top aides may have been on Qatar's payroll, even as Israel wages war in Gaza following Hamas's October 7th attacks. The arrests occurred last week after months of covert investigation by Israel's security services. These advisors, who had daily access to the Prime Minister and were privy to war cabinet discussions and classified intelligence, are now accused of maintaining secret financial relationships with Qatari officials. What makes this scandal particularly alarming is its timing. Qatar has positioned itself as a mediator in hostage negotiations, while simultaneously being one of Hamas's most significant financial backers. The possibility that individuals with direct influence on Israel's wartime decision-making were receiving Qatari funds raises profound questions about potential compromise of Israel's security interests at the most critical moment in recent history. At the center of this political earthquake are three of Netanyahu's most trusted confidants. First is Shlomo Filber, who served as the Director General of the Ministry of Communications under Netanyahu and was one of his longtime political operators. Filber wasn't just an employee, he was part of Netanyahu's inner circle for over a decade, managing sensitive political communications and strategic planning. Next is Nir Hefetz, Netanyahu's former media advisor and family spokesperson. Hefetz was particularly influential, crafting the Prime Minister's public messaging and managing relationships with journalists. He had unfettered access to Netanyahu's residence and was involved in virtually all public-facing decisions, making him privy to the administration's most sensitive deliberations. The third figure is Yair Katz, who served as a personal aide handling both political and private matters for the Netanyahu family. What makes Katz's involvement especially troubling is his role in coordinating the Prime Minister's daily schedule and managing access to him. All three men were in positions that granted them extraordinary proximity to power. They attended sensitive security briefings, war cabinet meetings, and diplomatic discussions concerning the current conflict. They had access to classified intelligence about military operations and hostage negotiations, precisely the information Qatar would find most valuable as both a mediator and Hamas supporter. The trio's responsibilities extended beyond mere advisory roles. They actively shaped policy decisions, controlled information flow to the Prime Minister, and influenced who gained access to Netanyahu during critical periods. The potential compromise of individuals with such deep access to Israel's wartime decision-making apparatus represents what security experts are calling an unprecedented national security risk. The Qatar connection at the heart of this scandal is as complex as it is troubling. According to prosecutors, the relationships between Netanyahu's advisors and Qatari officials began approximately 3 years ago, well before the current conflict erupted. Investigators claim they've uncovered evidence of substantial payments. Reports suggest amounts exceeding several $1 million, transferred through a sophisticated network of offshore accounts and shell companies designed to obscure their origins. These funds allegedly came from entities directly linked to the Qatari government, though officially labeled as consulting fees or strategic advisory services. In exchange, prosecutors believe these advisors provided Qatar with three critical assets: advance intelligence about Israeli military and diplomatic plans, influence over certain policy decisions, and real-time information during the current conflict. What makes this particularly alarming is the timing. Financial records indicate that payment amounts increased significantly in the months leading up to October 7th and continued to spike afterward. During this critical period, Qatar positioned itself as an essential mediator in hostage negotiations while simultaneously maintaining its long-standing financial support of Hamas. The evidence suggests these advisors participated in regular secure communications with Qatari officials, including at least 7 in-person meetings in third countries like Cyprus and Switzerland. Digital forensics have reportedly recovered encrypted messages discussing specific classified information that later appeared to inform Qatar's negotiating positions. Perhaps most concerning are indications that these advisors may have advocated for positions within Netanyahu's war cabinet that subtly aligned with Qatar's interests. This allegedly included pushing for certain operational pauses that intelligence officials now suspect may have given Hamas valuable time to regroup and relocate hostages during critical military operations. The relationship appears to have been mutually beneficial. Qatar gained unprecedented visibility into Israeli decision-making, while the advisors received not only direct payments but also promises of future business opportunities and luxury accommodations during their discreet visits to Doha. The central question haunting Israeli politics now is, what did Netanyahu know, and when did he know it? The Prime Minister has vehemently denied any knowledge of his closest advisors' alleged Qatari connections, calling the accusations politically motivated fabrications designed to topple his government during wartime. In a hastily arranged press conference, Netanyahu insisted he was completely blindsided by the arrests and that any suggestion of his involvement was preposterous. However, several troubling inconsistencies have emerged in Netanyahu's narrative. Security officials have pointed to at least 3 documented instances where unusual policy shifts occurred shortly after his arrested advisors held private meetings with him. These shifts subtly aligned with positions that would have benefited Qatar's strategic interest in the region. Former intelligence officers have also questioned how such activities could have escaped notice. One retired Mossad director noted that standard security protocols would typically flag unusual contacts between senior staff and foreign officials, especially from countries with Qatar's complex regional role. It stretches credibility, he stated, that these relationships remained completely hidden from a prime minister known for his meticulous attention to detail. Netanyahu's public stance has evolved noticeably as more evidence has come to light. His initial claims of total ignorance have gradually shifted to more carefully worded statements that he was not aware of any improper relationships, language that legal analysts suggest leaves room for having known about contacts, but not their allegedly illicit nature. Perhaps most damaging are the testimonies from 2 former cabinet members who claim they raised concerns directly with Netanyahu about his advisors' unusually pro-Qatar policy positions last year. According to these accounts, the Prime Minister dismissed their worries, assuring them that his team was simply cultivating diplomatic channels that might prove useful later. The prosecution appears to be building a case around the concept of willful blindness, suggesting that even if Netanyahu didn't explicitly know details, he deliberately avoided questioning suspicious patterns that would have been apparent to someone in his position. Whether this meets the legal threshold for criminal liability remains to be determined, but the political damage is already substantial. This scandal threatens to dramatically reshape Israel's wartime strategy and operational capabilities at a critical moment. Military experts are expressing grave concerns that sensitive information about Israel's tactical planning may have been compromised. If Qatar, which maintains complex relationships with Hamas and other regional actors, had insider access through these advisors, it could explain several unexpected operational challenges Israeli forces have encountered. The timing couldn't be more precarious for Israel's military leadership. Senior commanders are now forced to reassess previous strategic decisions, questioning whether certain diplomatic constraints or operational parameters were influenced by Qatari interests rather than Israel's security needs. This internal review process inevitably diverts crucial resources and attention from frontline operations. Defense analysts point to several puzzling policy decisions over the past months that now appear suspicious in retrospect. The unexplained delays in certain military operations, the peculiar restraint in specific territorial areas, and the sudden shifts in negotiating positions during ceasefire talks all align with what might have benefited Qatar's regional agenda. One retired general described it as finding fingerprints at a crime scene you didn't notice before. The scandal also threatens to unravel delicate coalition-building efforts with moderate Arab states who had been quietly increasing cooperation with Israel. These partnerships, crucial for regional intelligence sharing and operational coordination, are now in jeopardy as questions arise about whether confidential discussions may have been leaked to Qatar and potentially passed to hostile entities. Diplomatically, Israel's negotiating leverage has been severely undermined. International mediators are now questioning whether Israel's representatives at the table have been compromised or if their positions reflect undisclosed external influences. This erosion of trust couldn't come at a worse moment, as critical humanitarian and prisoner exchange negotiations hang in the balance. Perhaps most concerning is the potential impact on Israel's relationship with its military allies. Countries providing intelligence, weapons systems, and strategic support are reportedly reassessing information sharing protocols. According to Defense Ministry sources, several allied nations have already restricted certain classification levels of intelligence being shared with Israel until the full extent of the security breach can be determined. For frontline commanders and soldiers, the revelations create a dangerous atmosphere of uncertainty. Military operations require absolute clarity about strategic objectives and command integrity, both now called into question as troops wonder whether their missions serve Israel's interests or someone else's agenda. The domestic political earthquake triggered by Qatar Gate continues to send aftershocks throughout Israel's already fractured political landscape. Opposition leaders have seized on the scandal with unprecedented ferocity, with Yair Lapid declaring it the most severe security breach in Israel's history and calling for Netanyahu's immediate resignation during an emergency Knesset session. Netanyahu's fragile governing coalition now faces its most serious threat since formation. 2 minor coalition parties have already threatened to withdraw support unless a transparent, independent investigation is established. Religious Zionism leaders, traditionally stalwart Netanyahu allies, have maintained an uncomfortable silence, neither defending the prime minister nor joining calls for his resignation, a silence many political analysts interpret as preparing for political self-preservation. Public opinion has shifted dramatically according to 3 independent polls released this week. Netanyahu's approval rating has plummeted by 17 percentage points, with 64% of Israelis now believing he must have known about his advisor's Qatari connections. More troubling for the Prime Minister, 71% of respondents, including 53% who identified as right-wing, stated the scandal makes them question whether national security decisions have been made in Israel's best interest. Street protests have erupted in Tel Aviv, Jerusalem and Haifa, with demonstrators carrying signs reading "Treason during wartime" and "Qatar bought Bibi." These demonstrations mark a significant shift, drawing participants from both traditional anti-Netanyahu camps and formerly supportive right-wing communities, particularly families of soldiers currently serving in combat zones. The scandal has reframed Israeli political discourse almost overnight. Security credentials, long Netanyahu's electoral stronghold, have become his greatest vulnerability. Political commentators note that unlike previous controversies where Netanyahu successfully rallied his base against perceived witch hunts, the wartime context and national security implications have eroded his usually reliable support among security-focused voters. Within the Likud party itself, whispers of leadership challenges have begun. 3 senior Likud ministers have conspicuously avoided media appearances defending Netanyahu, while backbench Likud members have privately expressed concerns about their electoral futures if they remain tethered to a leader increasingly viewed as compromised on national security. The international diplomatic fallout from Qatar Gate threatens to reshape Israel's standing on the world stage at a critical moment in the war. In Washington, the Biden administration has maintained a carefully calibrated public response, expressing deep concern while stopping short of direct criticism of Netanyahu himself. However, behind closed doors, US officials have reportedly been furious, with one senior State Department source describing the revelations as potentially catastrophic for intelligence sharing arrangements. Pentagon officials have already instituted emergency protocols reviewing what sensitive military information may have been compromised. Congressional leaders from both parties have called for hearings, with several threatening to place conditions on the next military aid package until a full accounting of the scandal is provided. This represents a remarkable shift in the traditionally unshakable US-Israel security relationship. European allies have been less restrained in their responses. France's President Macron took the extraordinary step of postponing a scheduled call with Netanyahu, while Germany's Chancellor Scholz publicly questioned whether Israel's decision-making processes have been compromised by foreign influence. The UK has summoned Israel's ambassador for what diplomatic sources characterized as an extremely direct exchange. Perhaps most consequential are the reverberations across the Middle East. Saudi Arabia, which had been inching toward normalization with Israel before the war, has reportedly frozen all back-channel communications. UAE officials have expressed private concerns about whether sensitive information they shared with Israel may have been passed to Qatar and potentially to Iran. Jordan and Egypt, Israel's longest-standing Arab peace partners, find themselves in particularly difficult positions. Both countries have faced intense domestic pressure to downgrade ties with Israel during the war, and the Qatar scandal provides additional justification for creating distance. King Abdullah II of Jordan has cancelled a planned meeting with Israeli security officials, citing troubling questions about the integrity of Israel's security apparatus. For Qatar itself, the scandal creates a complex diplomatic balancing act. While ostensibly a mediator in hostage negotiations, Qatar now stands exposed as potentially running influence operations at the highest levels of the Israeli government, severely undermining its credibility as a neutral party in future talks. The legal proceedings against Netanyahu's advisors are currently in the preliminary stages, with all suspects held under what Israeli law defines as investigative detention. The Lahav 433 Anti-Corruption Unit, often called Israel's FBI, is leading the investigation in coordination with the Financial Crimes Division of the Israel Securities Authority. The court has approved an initial 15-day detention period for the primary suspects, which is unusually long by Israeli standards and indicates the seriousness of the case. The potential charges are both severe and wide-ranging. They include accepting bribes from a foreign entity, breach of trust, violation of national security protocols, money laundering, and possibly treason in wartime, the latter carrying a potential life sentence under Israeli law. Prosecutors have also indicated they may pursue charges related to failure to register as foreign agents, which mirrors similar cases in other countries involving clandestine influence operations. According to legal experts, the investigation timeline is likely to extend several months before formal indictments are issued. The complex nature of international financial transactions and encrypted communications involved will require extensive forensic analysis. Israeli prosecutors have already filed requests for mutual legal assistance with authorities in Cyprus, Switzerland, and the United Arab Emirates, where some of the alleged payments were reportedly routed. The court has imposed an unusually strict gag order on many aspects of the investigation, suggesting there may be sensitive national security dimensions not yet revealed to the public. However, Israeli media reports, citing anonymous justice officials, indicate that investigators are pursuing at least three separate lines of inquiry that could yield further revelations. First, authorities are examining whether additional members of Netanyahu's inner circle were receiving Qatari funds. Second, they're investigating if similar arrangements existed with other foreign entities beyond Qatar. And third, perhaps most consequentially, they're following financial trails to determine if any payments reached Netanyahu himself or his family members through indirect channels. The defense teams have vigorously challenged the detentions, arguing that the investigation could proceed with less restrictive conditions. However, the presiding judge cited substantial flight risk and potential for evidence tampering in denying bail requests. Legal analysts note that the prosecution's ability to secure such restrictive detention terms suggests they presented compelling initial evidence to the court. As Qatar Gate continues to unfold, what began as arrests of close Netanyahu advisors has evolved into one of the most consequential political scandals in Israel's recent history. The allegations that individuals with direct access to war cabinet deliberations may have been on Qatar's payroll during an active conflict represent an unprecedented breach of national security and trust. The scandal's significance extends far beyond the individuals involved. It strikes at the heart of Israel's decision-making apparatus during a critical military campaign and raises profound questions about potential foreign influence on sensitive strategic decisions. Whether Netanyahu knew about these alleged arrangements remains the central unanswered question that could determine his political survival. The immediate consequences are already apparent. Coalition stability has eroded, diplomatic relationships are strained, and public confidence in leadership has been shaken precisely when national unity is most needed. The legal proceedings will likely intensify these pressures as investigators follow multiple threads that could implicate additional figures or reveal broader foreign influence operations. Looking ahead, several key developments warrant close attention. The expansion of investigations to other Netanyahu associates could signal a widening corruption probe. Any evidence directly linking the Prime Minister to knowledge of these arrangements would trigger immediate calls for his resignation. The potential impact on peace negotiations and ceasefire talks with Hamas cannot be overstated, as Qatar's role as mediator now appears compromised. Perhaps most consequentially, Qatar Gate may fundamentally reshape Israeli politics for years to come. Beyond the fate of individual careers, it challenges basic assumptions about national security oversight and the integrity of Israel's democratic institutions during times of crisis. The ultimate legacy of this scandal will depend not just on court verdicts, but on Israel's institutional response to what appears to be an unprecedented foreign infiltration of its highest decision-making circles.